as a moment that changes everything. Not a loud moment, not a dramatic scene or a falling sky, just a quiet, ordinary day when someone looks at you and says something they were never supposed to say out loud, and in that single breath, every version of yourself you ever doubted suddenly made sense. This is not a motivational speech. This is not a comfort session. What you are about to hear is the truth, the kind that has been sitting in the shadows of your life, waiting for the right moment to step into the light. And today, that moment is now. You may have found this video by accident. You may have been scrolling, tired, distracted, maybe a little broken, but I want you to stop right here, because what you're about to discover is something that was meant to find you, not someone else. You. The people in your life have been carrying a secret about who you really are, what you are really made of, and why certain people have worked so hard to make you forget it, and toured. Finally that secret gets spoken out loud. Stay with me, because in the next few minutes, your entire understanding of yourself is about to shift. There is something that happens deep inside the human mind when the truth finally surfaces after years of being buried. Psychologists call it a cognitive rupture, that shattering moment when the story you have been told about yourself collides with the story that was always true. And the collision does not feel like relief. Not at first. It feels like grief. Because when you learn that the person you were told you were too sensitive, too much, too needy, too loud, not smart enough, not strong enough, not worthy enough was never who you actually were, the first emotion is not joy. The first emotion is rage, a quiet, deep, itching rage that asks one question over and over again: why did no one tell me sooner? And the answer to that question is the most important thing you will ever learn about the people who have surrounded you. On this life, people do not hide the truth about you because they are cruel. Sometimes, but not always. Most of the time, people hide the truth about you because the truth about you is dangerous to them. Dangerous to the version of reality they need you to believe so that you stay small, stay compliant, stay grateful for crumbs. The moment someone truly sees you, your power, your depth, your capacity, they face a choice. They can honor what they see, or they can bury it. And what they choose in that moment tells you everything about them and nothing about you. Nothing. There is a psychological principle that researchers have studied for decades, and it is called identity suppression by proxy. It is not always a conscious act. Most people who diminish you do not wake up in the morning with a plan to erase you. They do it instinctively, reflexively, because your light activates something in them that they cannot face their own darkness, their own unlived potential, own grief over who they could have been if they had been brave enough to become it. And so instead of doing that inner work, they project. They criticize. They minimize. They look at the most powerful parts of you, and they call those parts a problem. You were told you were too emotional. What they meant was you feel things at a depth that terrifies people who have learned to feel nothing. You were told you were too ambitious. What they meant was your hunger for more reminds them of everything they stopped reaching for. You were told you were difficult. What they meant was you refused to make yourself easy to control. Every criticism that ever made you shrink was not a verdict on your character. It was a confession of someone else's fear. And here is where it gets even deeper, because this is what no one warns you about. When you spend years receiving these distorted reflections of yourself, you begin to internalize them. You begin to do to yourself what others once did to you. You become the one who tells you that you are too much. You become the one who talks yourself out of the dream, out of the room, out of the relationship, out of the opportunity. You become so fluent in the language of your own diminishment that you no longer need anyone else to speak it. You speak it to yourself, in your own voice, lying in the dark at 3 a.m, questioning everything, doubting everything, wondering if there is something fundamentally, irreparably wrong with you. There is not. There never was. But I need you to understand why you believe there is, because understanding the mechanism is the only way to dismantle it. When a child receives consistent messaging that they are a problem, that their needs are inconvenient, that their emotions are too big, that their dreams are unrealistic, the brain does not reject that messaging. The brain, because it is designed for survival above all else, absorbs it. Because if you are a child, and the people responsive, utly, for keeping you safe are telling you that you are the problem, your brain makes a ruthless calculation. It is safer to believe I am wrong than to believe my protectors are wrong. To believe your caretakers are wrong is terrifying, destabilizing, existentially threatening. To believe you are wrong is painful, but survivable. And so the brain chooses pain over existential terror every single time. That is not weakness. That is one of the most elegant and devastating survival mechanisms the human mind has ever developed. And the tragedy is that it works so well in childhood that it keeps running long after childhood is over, long after you have left those rooms, those houses, those people. The neural pathways are carved deep, and they keep firing the same messages in the same voices with the same certainty. And you, decades later, sitting in a life that looks nothing like where you started, still hearing those voices as if they are your own thoughts. As if they are the truth. They are not your thoughts, and they are not the truth. Now here is the moment this video stops being psychology and starts being something else entirely. Because I want to talk to you about what it means when the universe or God, or whatever word holds meaning for you, decides that you have been lied to long enough. There is a point in certain people's lives, and I believe you are at or near that point right now, which is why you found this video. Which is why you are still watching where something greater than human understanding begins to correct the record. Where the things that were hidden about you begin to surface, where the people who knew the truth but stayed silent begin to feel an unexplainable urge to finally speak it, where strangers see something in you that your closest circle denied. Where opportunity bends in your direction in ways that defy the narrative you were handed. This is not coincidence. This is not luck. This is what happens when a soul that was designed fifth. Something significant has been patient long enough when the suppression has reached its limit and something in the fabric of things begins to push. Back. And someone not someone you expected, maybe someone you barely know, maybe someone you lost contact with. Maybe someone sitting across from you right now has finally said it. Or is about to say it. Or has been saying it quietly in ways you have been too conditioned to receive. They have looked at you and seen what was always there. The resilience you were told was stubbornness. The sensitivity you were told was weakness. The vision you were told was delusion. The love you were told was neediness. And they named it correctly, finally, after all this time. How does that land in your body right now? Because for a lot of people, the first response to being truly seen is not gratitude. It is suspicion. It is the terrifying question, what do they want? Why are they saying this? What is the catch? And that response, that immediate, a retreat from being witnessed, is one of the saddest signatures of a person who has been damaged by the people who were supposed to see them clearly. When love was always conditional, unconditional recognition feels like a trap. When honesty was always weaponized, a truth feels like the opening move of a manipulation. When safety was always temporary, permanence feels fictional. So you flinch, you deflect. You minimize the compliment, you brush off the acknowledgement, you redirect the conversation, you make a joke, you physically look away. Not because you do not want to be seen, but because somewhere along the way, being seen became synonymous with being vulnerable to attack. Being truly known became the most dangerous thing you could allow, and yet here you are, still watching, still listening, because part of you, the part that has survived everything, knows that you cannot keep doing this, that the armor, however necessary it once was, has started to cost you more than it protects you from. That the distance you have maintained from your own worth is the very thing standing between you and the life you were actually built for. Let me tell you something about the people who try to break others. This is the part that most people never hear, because it requires a kind of psychological depth that surface-level self-help is not willing to go to. The people who spent years convincing you that you were less than those people were not powerful. They were terrified. Every act of diminishment, every cutting word, every dismissal, every moment they made you feel invisible or ridiculous or unworthy, every single one of those acts was an act of terror management. They were terrified of what you represented, terrified of their own inadequacy in the face of your potential. Are terrified that if you ever truly stood up in who you are, you would no longer need them, and they were right to be terrified. Because that is exactly what happens when a person finally reconnect with their authentic power, not the performed power, not the defensive power, not the power that screams, "Look how unbothered I am," but the quiet, a rooted, undeniable power of someone who knows who they are. The people who built their significance on your smallness have nowhere left to stand. Your healing is their exposure. Your rise is their reckoning. And that is not your problem. That is their journey. You are not responsible for managing their discomfort with your becoming. There is a specific kind of loneliness that no one talks about enough, and I want to name it here because I think you know it intimately. It is the loneliness of being misread by the people closest to you. Not ignored, misread. There is a difference. Ignored is painful in a straightforward way. Misread is a more complex agony. Because the people are present, the attention is there, but the version of you they are engaging with is a fiction. They are talking to the story they made up about you. They are reacting to the label they assigned you years ago. They are relating to a caricature, a role, a fixed and flattened version of a person who has long since grown beyond the frame they put you in. And sometimes you play the role because it is easier. Because challenging someone's image of you requires an energy you do not always have. Because in certain rooms, being truly yourself has historically resulted in punishment. And your nervous system has learned to protect you by keeping the real you hidden, performing the expected version, giving them what they need to see so that you can get through the interaction without conflict. That is not dishonesty. That is a highly intelligent, adaptive strategy that served you at a specific time. But it has a long-term cost. And that cost is a fracture, a split between the self you show and the self that actually exists. And over time, living in that fracture becomes exhausting in a way that touches everything. Your sleep, your relationships, your body, your ability to feel joy, your sense of direction. People who live in that fracture for too long begin to develop what psychologists describe as identity diffusion, a genuine uncertainty about who you are, what you want, what you believe, what matters to you, where you end and other people begin. Not because you are confused or weak, but because you have spent so long shape-shifting for survival that you have lost consistent access to the shape that is actually yours. But here is what is true: the self that is actually yours never disappears. It goes underground, it goes quiet, but it does not go away. It speaks in flashes in the moment when a piece of music breaks something open in your chest, and you cannot explain why. In the moment when you hear someone else's story, and you feel a recognition so deep, it almost brings you to your knees. In the moment when you are completely alone and a thought rises in you that is so clear, so uncontaminated by anyone else's opinion, that you almost do not recognize it as your own voice because it sounds so different from the voice that usually narrates your life. That flash, that recognition, that clarity that is you, the real you, the one that was there before they got to you, the one that will be there long after every diminishing voice has fallen silent. There is a reason that certain people in your life have not been able to leave you alone even when they claimed they wanted nothing to do with you. There is a reason that people who said you were too much kept coming back for more. There is a reason that people who dismissed your ideas somehow found ways to benefit from them later. There is a reason that people who told you that you were ordinary could not seem to stop watching you, talking about you, wondering about you. You know what that reason is? They could not stay away from you, because what they told you about yourself was a lie they were telling themselves as much as they were telling you. And lies are maintenance. Lies require constant reinforcement. The moment you stopped being available for the reinforcement, the moment you stepped back, pulled away, stopped performing the smallness they needed from you, the lie became harder to sustain. Because what they see when they look at you, if they are being honest with themselves even for a moment, is exactly what they tried to convince you does not exist. And that confrontation is unbearable to someone who has built their entire sense of self around being more than you. Now I want to speak directly to the version of you that is the hardest to reach. The version that has heard everything I am saying and has a quiet but persistent voice in the back of the mind saying, "But what if they were right?" What if this is just what I want to believe? What if I really am the things they said I was? That voice is not wisdom. That voice is not discernment. That voice is the last remaining echo of a system that was installed without your consent. By people who did not have the right to define you. In rooms you did not choose to be in at ages when you had no capacity to question what you were being taught. It is the voice of old programming trying to preserve itself, because programming, even destructive programming, resists being deleted. That is simply how it works. A way you know the difference between genuine self-reflection and internalized diminishment is this: genuine self-reflection leads somewhere. It identifies something specific, something changeable, something you can act on, and it leaves you feeling more capable, not less. Internalized diminishment goes in circles. It does not identify anything actionable. It just confirms the same verdict over and over again in slightly different language. It makes you feel stuck, not clearer. It does not illuminate, it obscures. And it is almost always delivered in someone else's voice wearing the costume of your own. If you listen carefully to the critical voice in your head, and I mean really listen, not to what it is saying, but to how it sounds, the cadence, the tone. As specific words it uses, you will often recognize it. You will hear the echo of a parent, a teacher, a sibling, an ex-partner, a former friend, a bully from a specific corridor in a specific school at a specific age. You will hear the voice that was present at the moment of maximum impact. When you were most open, most trusting, most in need of accurate reflection, and instead received a distortion. That distortion lodged itself somewhere deep and kept speaking long after the person left. The person may be gone from your life entirely. They may not have thought about you in years, but their words are still running in your system like an old program on a computer that no one ever bothered to uninstall. Today you uninstall it. Not by pretending it was not there, not by forcing yourself to think positively over the top of it, but by looking at it clearly, naming it accurately, and choosing consciously, deliberately, one moment at a time to replace it with something true. And what is true? Is this the very things that made you a target for diminishment are the things that make you extraordinary? The depth of your feeling, the acuity of your perception, the stubborn refusal of your soul to accept a life that does not match what you sense is possible. The way you love, which is not needy, it is abundant, and abundance is terrifying to people who only know scarcity. The way you see, which is not naive, it is visionary, and vision is threatening to people who have stopped being able to imagine. The way you persist, which is not obsessive, it is driven by something in you that knows, even when you have forgotten it consciously, that you were not put here to disappear. I want to tell you about something that happens when a person begins to genuinely reclaim themselves. There is a period, and it is uncomfortable, and I want to prepare you for it where arts get worse before they get better. Because the moment you stop performing smallness, the people around you who depended on your smallness go through a kind of withdrawal. And in that withdrawal, they push harder. The criticism gets louder, the passive aggression becomes less passive, the manipulation becomes more transparent because it has to work harder. The people who used to undermine you quietly begin to do it openly. And if you do not understand what is happening, this period can feel like confirmation that you were wrong to try to change, wrong to want more, wrong to believe the new story. It is not confirmation. It is the system fighting back. It is the resistance that always comes right before the breakthrough. It is the last, loudest gasp of a dynamic that is dying because you are no longer feeding it. You are not doing something wrong. You are doing the most right thing you have ever done, and you are feeling the friction of it, which is real and painful, but which is also evidence that something is genuinely shifting. On the other side of that friction is something most people never experience, because most people turn back when it gets hard. On the other side is a life lived from the inside out. Relationships chosen from a place of wholeness rather than hunger. Work that aligns with what you are actually built for rather than what you were told you deserved. A relationship with yourself that is steady and clear and honest, not perfect, but real. A quality of presence in your own life that you have never had before because you were always too busy managing the gap between who you are and who you were pretending to be. You will not get there by bypassing the work, but you are already further along than you know. The fact that this is landing, the fact that something in these words is finding a target in your chest rather than sliding off the surface. The fact that you have sat with this long enough to let it reach you, that is not nothing. That is a work already beginning. That is recognition. And recognition, genuine recognition, is the beginning of everything. There is one more thing that must be said, and it is perhaps the most important thing in everything you have heard today. Reclaiming yourself is not revenge. I want to be clear about this because for many people, the initial motivation for healing is anger, and anger is a legitimate and necessary part of the process, but it is not the destination. If you build your new life primarily out of the desire to prove them wrong, you will find that you have handed them the architect's pen for your future. Every choice made in reaction to someone else is still a choice shaped by them. The most powerful thing you can do is not to prove them wrong. The most powerful thing you can do is become so fully yourself that the question of what they think ceases to be relevant. That is the shift. That is the thing that cannot be faked or performed or rushed into existence. It is the qui, art. Internal reorganization that happens when you stop measuring yourself against someone else's distorted ruler and start understanding your own dimensions. When you stop trying to earn the recognition that was always yours and start living as though you already have it because you do. When the confession that someone finally made about you, the truth that God or the universe or life itself has been trying to deliver to you through every person, every experience, every gut feeling you ever dismissed, when that confession finally lands, not as a compliment you are waiting to disbelieve, but as a recognition of something you already know to be true. That is the moment. That is what this whole journey has been moving toward. The people who have been watching you, the people who have been waiting for you to figure this out, the people who have been holding the truth about you like something fragile and precious, are waiting for the moment when you are finally ready to receive it without fly, hunching, without running, without immediately dismantling it with self-doubt. Those people are not gone. They are still there. And what they have to say about you, what they have always known about you, is not too good to be true. It is just true. You are not a work in progress who will one day be worth something. You are not almost good enough, not quite ready, not yet deserving. You are not the accumulation of every wound someone else inflicted on you. You are not the sum of every mistake made in the fog of pain and confusion. You are not the roles that were handed to you before you were old enough to refuse them. You are not the small story. You were never the small story. And somewhere in the deepest part of you, beneath the doubt, beneath the armor, beneath the exhaustion of having been everything to everyone while being nothing to yourself, you have always known that. Today, unknowing it becomes something you are allowed to say out loud. So I want to ask you something, and I want you to sit with it genuinely, not just scroll past it. Not just let it be a throwaway moment at the end of a video. What is the one truth about yourself that you have been waiting for someone else to give? You permission to believe? Not the polished answer, not the answer you think sounds right, the real one, the one that has been sitting quietly in you, waiting. Leave it in the comments, not for me, but for yourself, because the moment you write it down, the moment you say it out loud in any form, something shifts. Something that has been waiting underground begins to rise. And the people reading below you, carrying their own version of this same question, will feel less alone because of it. That is what happens when people start telling the truth. The truth, once spoken, makes room for more truth, and the world, your world, changes.